This is Coffin Ridge North, SP081, and it's 1047 local. That's 1647, and we're on 30 meters. Here we go. With all these guys that are hard at work learning CW.
Yeah.
Morse code. So let me begin with a little story about a friend of mine that I early on met in Summits on the Air, and he was trying to learn Morse code, and actually he was in active duty in the Army, and decided that he wanted to learn Morse code. So I was out in California on a trip with my wife. We every year get out to Santa Cruz where we met, and actually it was on a kayak trip in Monterey Bay with a marine biologist, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, beforehand I synced up with Matt. His call's K0MP, and we were gonna meet up and do a SOTA together. So we chose a peak, and we met and climbed up to the summit, which was just fairly low peak and a short hike. And we got up there, and I got my rig out and strung up an antenna. Actually, it was an ATS-4, which is one of Steve Weber's rigs. And it's CW only, and I think I started out on 20 meters, and I worked 30 meters, and Matt was just sitting there watching me, and so I turned to Matt and I said, "Hey, get on here and try this." And he looked at me and he said, "No way, man." And I said, "Hey, it's easy. I'll decode for you and coach you through it." Yeah, and it took me, a little more convincing, but finally he got on, and I spotted him, and the pile showed up, and we whittled away at it, and he made 4 contacts, and he turned around, looked at me, and he said, I'm done. That's it." And bottom line was, he was sweating bullets. But the thing is, with Summits on the Air, the chasers, they all want to be in your logbook, and they'll do anything. They'll slow down, they'll repeat, they'll stand by and let the station that you're trying to work you. They're a great bunch of operators. And get me started talking about Summits on the Air. The bottom line is that they're a great group of people, and the benefits of Summits on the Air is, number one, you get out in nature, you get to exercise, You lose weight. So I can eat anything I want now and not feel guilty. But no, seriously, it really fine tunes your operating skills and your ability to set up a station with minimal gear, and also fine tunes your packing list so that you don't leave stuff behind. Can't list the number of times that I've been out there and realized, I forgot something like the power cord to the radio from the battery, or forgot to charge the battery. So I've got a very detailed list now that I go through before I go to bed that night, and so the next morning my pack is in the truck, and I'm ready to go, and all of that. So, but it's the chasers will do anything to be in your log. It's kind of like if you're a grade school teacher or a kindergarten teacher, and you've got this jar of candy, and you've got these kids that are all talking, and you say, hey, who wants a sucker? And all these hands go up, and you go, okay, you in the red sweater, back row, and everybody else is quiet, and it's only that person that's waving their hand at you. And once you get a signal report from them and vice versa, that's it. It's Summits on the Air is very, the protocols are very defined, and it's basically, this exchange is, I call CQ, 3 or 4 stations answer me, and I say, okay, K0MP, and everybody stands by, and K0MP gives me a signal report. I give him a signal report, and the exchange is basically a signal report. They may give you their state, and then it's BK, in other words, break, back to me, and I say, fine business, thank you, 73s. And then the pile starts in again. And it's pretty cut and dry. But anyway, the other comment I want to make is, I remember when I was learning, and I got in a QSO, and the QSO format is pretty standard, but the other station sent that dreaded piece of punctuation, did it, did it, and I went, uh-oh, was I paying attention? What do you say before that? Which is, what do you do at that point? But you got to figure that, maybe he's like you, he missed something like your name or your QTH, and all you have to do is send a question mark back to him, like, what'd you miss, or what'd you say? Or repeat your name, here is, QTH is, call sign is. But I find that most people on CW are pretty gracious and pretty forgiving. And they want to keep the QSO going, and most good operators will slow down for you if you request it, QRS. So I don't know what else I can chime in on, but that's kind of the story. Well, I was going to finish the story with Matt. That was about 6 years ago. He's now living in Idaho with his young family, and he's activating summits. And I chased him the other day, and he sent me a QSL card. And on that QSL card at the bottom, he said, hey, thank you for pushing me into the deep end, baptism by fire. He said, I wouldn't be here today if you hadn't you know, nudged me and thrown me into the deep end and helped me swim, so to speak, and encouraged me along the way. And really, there wasn't. I mean, it's kind of like showing a guy how to fish. Once you get the knack of it, it's pretty easy and it's a lot of fun. So that's my 2 cents. Are there any questions any of you might have?
Go ahead and raise your hands if you want to, and he can pick you. Okay. John, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, I like learning from other people's experience. You mentioned that you'd forgotten one thing or another in your various SOTAs and made a list, a checklist, I guess, that you use every time you go out. I've never seen a checklist like that. I'd be interested in seeing yours, just to see what kinds of things that it's important to remember.
Yeah, well, probably the most important thing is your lunch. And I'm serious. Having a bunch of snacks along, and I make a sandwich in the morning. I call it a summit sandwich, and I really look forward to that after, you know, an hour on the trail, humping up a mountainside. It's something to look forward to. Not only that, but once I get my station set up, I've got a bunch of friends that are going to be calling me and welcoming me to the summit, so to speak. It's all those chasers. Once you spot yourself, well, before that, I put in an alert, and the chasers kind of make up their afternoon by saying, "Oh, okay, Steve's going to be on this frequency at this time, and George is going to be on this frequency or this mountain at this time."
Yes.
And you know, there's plus there's apps that notify, or like an alarm goes off and pops up and says, you know, George is on this frequency at this time right now. And so if they're in the shack, tune their radio to that frequency, and sure enough, here's George calling CQ. But I could share that list with you. Matter of fact, I'll send it to Bill, and he can distribute it to the group. So
I shall do that. As a matter of fact, I can go. I've got a list here that I use. Well, probably we all do, you know, because you don't want to go through all the hiking, all that sort of thing, and then forget something, and then you can't get on the air. I mean,
exactly.
Really, that's a downer for the chaser. You know, the way you operate on the peak dictates a lot about, you know, the people that are going to chase you. If they can confide in you that you'll be on the air for a while, and you'll cover the band that they want to be able to contact you on, then, you know, they're going to, like for Steve, I mean, they'll follow him to the ends of the earth to work every day. Every day he's on. I know that because I do it. And KX0R is the same way. That's who George is. He's alluding to. And again, you know, we'll be going over a lot of what George does after this talk. But the reason they're popular, one reason, is because of their operating skill. You know, they're in the right places at the right time. They follow the propagation correctly. And so, you know, that's why people like to follow Steve and George.
Yeah, the amazing thing is, I can, you know, at home here, I like to play with antennas, and end-fed antennas are really easy to put up and deploy. They work great. I've been messing with doing a trapped end-fed antenna for 20, 30, and 40. And what amazes me is I can get on here at home, and I can call CQ till I'm blue in the face. And you know, it teaches you a lot about propagation using reverse beacon network, because I know I'm getting out. I go to the web and I can see my signal is heard by several stations, but there's nobody listening to the QRP watering hole, like 14060 on 20 meters, for example, or 7030 on 40 meters. But you get up on a peak and a minimal antenna running 3, 4, 5 watts and put a spot in, all of a sudden you're the rare DX, and there's a bunch of stations that are all fighting to work you. And what's amazing to me is the propagation. If you look at I forget what site it is, but there's the site that tells you what the propagation is. Solar flux is 60, which is pretty dismal, and the A index is 7 or something. All those numbers kind of go out the window when all of a sudden I'm working a guy on the East Coast, K3 TCU, and he's knocking my ears off, and he's running 5 watts or whatever. I'm running less than that, and we're talking to each other on a band that supposedly is dead. And it's just fun. You can tune up. As a matter of fact, I do a band check by tuning up to the digital frequency, FTA, PSK, and those guys are just going crazy. There's always, it's kind of an indicator of how the band's doing by tuning up to the digital frequencies. And I know that the band's open, even though the forecasting is that it's poor conditions. And yeah, granted, compared to 10 years ago, when you could go on in 10 meters and work Europe with a piece of wire hanging out the window. I just happen to have a piece of wire in a tree and sitting on a mountaintop. It's a kick. And it keeps me smiling all the way back down the mountain to my truck. And when I get home, entering the log and seeing who else has entered their log into the database of the website. But yeah, having a list is a good thing. And having your radio all packed and ready to go. Any other questions?
Just raise your hand if you got one. Keith, you want to say hello to Steve? Keith? Unmute. You don't want to talk? Okay.
Who, me?
Yeah. Thought you might want to say hello to KR7RK is right beside you there.
I did. I sent him a private text. I was like, hey, man, I've worked you a ton of times, and he's worked me too up on the mountain.
Oh, yeah,
But,
that's right. And Steve is right on the other Steve is right on the other side of you. And KR7RK is right here too. So we've got some real goats here.
I'm not a goat yet.
Yeah, but Steve, KR7RK is. You want to unmute Steve? Keith, I'm sorry.
Keith
Keith,
is, yeah.
I'm looking at Steve and looking at Keith here. Keith, you want to unmute and say hello? Unmute on the far left side. Or you can hit the space bar. Nope, you're not unmuted. Okay. So how about you, David? You want to say anything, David? Dotsie.
Oh, I guess I would emphasize the importance of using CW and Morse code. As Bill mentioned earlier, when I was living in the Southeast, I was strictly a single sideband operator. But but I saw the handwriting on the wall with the propagation cycle going down, and you can't always spot yourself, and I guess we'll be talking about spotting later, but you can't always let people know where you are and what frequency you're on, and you're on the air. And with voice, you don't have the reverse beacon to help you. So there were some summits where I would get 3, you need 4 contacts. I would get 3 with voice, and I just couldn't get that 4th one. And I had very rudimentary CW skills, but I would bring them out for the purposes of getting 1 contact. And that saved my bacon on several summits. And so then I actually took the CW Academy Level 1 class, and that got me over the hump. And so now I'm a slow operator, but I'm enjoying the operating with CW, knowing that I'm unlikely to have an unsuccessful operation.
Very good. Very unlikely. And by the way, David's call is AE9Q.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure that he's worked Steve
Yeah.
quite a few times.
Indeed.
Speaking of a list, see this? This is a little jumper I had to make to go to my 4 QPR tuner, 4-state QPR tuner, and I forgot it. Forgot the tuner, so I cut it, and I used the internal tuner. And then I went up to another summit, and I forgot the one that was complete. So I had to twist it back together to make my 4-state QPR tuner to work. So a list is a good thing.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. It
I'm
brings
learning
out,
the hard way.
it brings out the MacGyver in you. And you know, I mean, I was part of the Races and Aries group here locally, and I kind of faded away from that just because they talk a good game. They talk about being prepared and all that kind of stuff, but it's rarely do they practice what they preach. Although they do a lot of good public service, and I don't mean to discount that, but I think Summits on the Air really makes you, it's a field day every time you go set up and operate, and no 2 setups are the same. It seems like there's, you know, a different tree, or you have to set up, find a way to hang your wire or bring a mast with of some kind. And then it's, as he pointed out, it's having the right cable to adapt from your tuner to your radio. And if you don't have one, out comes the Swiss Army knife, and MacGyver lives.
All right.
So,
Anybody else with a question? Dan, didn't you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. I used to haul up my 857 in a tuner and everything else, and then now I've got a KX3. But one of the questions that I had, and I know there's several folks on here that's had a lot of more experience with them than I have, but I've been looking for, from a SOTA perspective, trying to find maybe a good video or whatever on how to better utilize my radio for SOTA, as far as using the filters and using the gain and stuff like that, so I can, you know, hear better when I'm out on the summit.
yeah, well, for starters, when you're on a summit, provided it's not one of the summits that has a communication set up, cell tower and all that kind of stuff, because that's another noise source. But most of the time when I'm on a summit, there's very little noise. And most of the frequencies that seems like folks choose are away from, well, at least you try and pick a frequency that's away from contests or other QSOs. So you start calling CQ on a clear frequency. Excuse me, but it's yeah, you'll get to know your radio, trust me. It helps to probably start with, you know, a medium bandwidth filter, and not the tightest setting, but a medium setting as opposed to a broad setting. Because you'll hear the whole pile in a broad setting, and you kind of want to narrow it down. And by what I mean by pile, there might be 4 or 5 stations that are calling you, and they might all be on the same frequency. And that's another technique, actually, when I chase, is sometimes I move down or I move up so that my tone isn't the same tone as everybody else's. And the activator will go, oh, I'll take WG0AT because he's higher pitch frequency. I can hear him. And that, because it makes you stand out. But that's kind of some of the subtleties that you sort of pick up by, you know, experience and just getting on the air. But yeah, that would be a good video. Actually, it's if you have the opportunity to go with somebody, it's really helpful too, because you can kind of see what's going on and ask questions and pick up, you know, hints and tips, so to speak.
Anybody else? Question? No, okay. Well, I guess they're questioned out. Anybody want to say hello to Steve directly? Anything like that?
Well, hey, it's been my pleasure to kind of share with you the experience, and I wish you all well on your pursuit of Morse code. I really encourage you to get on and have some conversations with folks. That's where it's at. And you know, for the most part, I think the rest of the hams out there, particularly if you hear them getting on, calling CQ, all they're looking for is somebody to talk to. And you know, they might be old farts that have been in the CW arena for years and years, but they will slow down. They will take the time to repeat and engage you, and it works both ways. So it's a language, and the more you use it, the better you get. You'll be surprised at how fast you'll move along if you get on and make, you know, a QSO a day or two. I'm amazed myself at how my code speed has kicked up ever since I started, you know, working these piles. You're trying to talk to these guys one at a time and kind of move down your logbook and play the propagation, move down to different bands so that I can work the locals, for example, on 60 meters or 40 meters. 30's a really great band from the standpoint that I'm amazed. Sometimes I'll work somebody on the East Coast and West Coast, and it's usually that's 20 meters, but lately 20 has been a lot of QSB and that kind of thing. But the surprise is always the DX station in Europe. The guy in particular is, I think of is EA2IF or John Shaw, ZL1BYZ. These guys have big antennas and run power. And their justification for their investment is the ability to pick out this weak station on a mountaintop that's got a wire in a tree and work them. And you know, I was talking to John, emailing him, and he said that, yeah, you know, propagation is down, but he says it's really fun chasing your SOTA activators because it's like working DX. And I mean, he's doing the heavy lifting. All I'm doing is just, you know, putting out as much power as I can from the battery I've got and the radio I've got with a compromised antenna. But yet, here I am working with somebody that's, you know, 6,000, 10,000 miles away from me. And that's a hoot. That's a real hoot. I mean, that makes me grin ear from ear all the way back to the truck. So,
I have a question. You mentioned that you're a fan of half-wave in-fed antennas, and you mentioned they were easy to set up. I presume there would be some performance reasons why you would be for them too. I'm just wondering, what do you see as the advantages of a half-wave in-fed?
Well, number one, I mean, the downside is that half-wave dipole is easy to feed because you can feed it in the center, and it's, you know, relatively 50 to 70 ohms, and so you can feed it with coax, and your radio likes to see, you know, 50 ohms or something close to that. So with an in-fed, you've got to transform that high impedance on the end, which is somewhere in the area of 4,500 to 5,000 ohms. And you've got to transform that down to 50 ohms. So using I hate to call it a balun, but it's really a impedance transformer. And there's a myriad of schematics on the internet now. They've become very popular antenna. And it's, what I like best about it is I don't have to carry coax with me. Coax is heavy. And I don't have to mess with hanging the antenna in the center and have this piece of coax dripping down to my radio. With an in-fed, I can basically feed the antenna at my radio, and that piece of wire can be thrown up in a tree, or I can use a telescopic mast and hold it up and, you know, run it off and fasten it to a bush or whatever. And oftentimes I'll have maybe kind of an inverted L configuration, or sometimes an inverted V configuration, or sometimes it runs straight up to a treetop where I've, using the kind of David Goliath, you know, slinging a rock, I throw it up in the tree, and that's where it stays until I'm packing up, and, you know, I really release it at my end, it falls down to the ground, and then I wind it up on a winder. So my whole antenna probably weighs maybe 5 or 6 ounces. In my radio, right now I'm kind of fascinated with you know, these little K0MP rigs that Steve Weber came out a few years ago, and I built one. My whole station weighs less than a pound. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a 2-band, 20 meters and 30 meters, and then my little homemade paddle that I made out of. Let's see if I can get the light on it. Made out of, it's probably too much light. This paddle is made out of a little piece of wood, and I've got beryllium spring clips here that are used for RFI on a computer panel, and they're touching a copper band that goes around the piece of wood. So it's basically a switch. I don't know if you can see this. but it's basically a switch that's that springs back and forth, and the radio has a built-in keyer, and I've got a piece of like Velcro. It's 3M dual lock, and on the back of the radio, and then I've got a strap that goes around my knee or thigh, and this radio sits on my thigh, and I find a rock, or I've got a sits pad in my backpack that I use to throw down on the ground or a rock, so I find a comfortable place to sit, and away I go. I also use my iPhone as a logging tool. There's a recorder in it that records real time, and so I can focus on listening and hear who's calling me, and then I get to relive the whole experience again the next morning over coffee. And it's just like I'm back on the summit. I can hear the birds tweeting, and you know, anyway, I digress. But the unfit antenna, I've really grown to like a lot, just because it's lightweight, easy to deploy, and there's no feed line, no coax, and it's less. I mean, there's less losses. So instead of losing power up my feed line and the coax, my power is going into the antenna. That's assuming that the transformer I built is doing its job.
How about multi-band operation? Does that work with an infid?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I've been playing with some homebrew traps. There's a lot of circuits that are out there for that. Matter of fact, the K0MP guys, .com, I think it is, they actually have little circuit board kits and you know, instructions how to make a trap, and they have all the parts, and it's really pretty cut and dry. But there again, the best thing, I mean, I find myself setting up at home, making sure everything's going to work, and using reverse speaker network to, you know, test it out, and then I try and deploy it similar to the way I set it up in the backyard. I know that mountaintops, the environment's not always the same as it was in my backyard. Thus, you know, the SWR might vary a little bit, but I found that it doesn't vary more than maybe 10% compared to, you know, what I saw at home. So it's not going to blow up the radio.
Yeah. So is grounding less of a problem than infid?
Yeah, the theory is that you're supposed to have about a 5% counterpoise, and oftentimes, sometimes I'll experience a little RF on the radio. I mean, at 5 watts, you're not going to get RF burns, but I do notice sometimes my paddle will become a little tingly, or when I touch the radio, it's a little tingly, and I usually pack a 17-foot piece of hookup wire, and that's so in case I forget the antenna, at least I've got a quarter wave on 20 meters that I can use. But that winds up being a counterpoise. And oftentimes with, you know, using headphones, or even the cord that goes to the paddle, if I'm using a paddle that's not attached to the radio, that winds up being a counterpoise. As to do myself, I wound up being part of the counterpoise. So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Anybody
Good
else?
questions. Pardon me?
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Questions? We'll be going through NFEDs pretty in depth here. We'll be showing you some antenna current modeling with NFEDs and impedances and all kinds of different things. So what Steve said just fit right into what I'm going to tell you too after Steve's done. So it's a great little antenna. It's a versatile antenna. It's
Yeah, and let me just also preface that I'm not a double E. I'm not an engineer. Actually, I'm an art major. But I've played around with this stuff for 50 some years, and I just basically build stuff. If it works, great. If it doesn't, it goes in the junk box. And then maybe I bump into somebody like Bill that knows his stuff, and he explains to me what's really going on. And I learn by experience, and also by getting together with people that really know the stuff. And it's fun. It's really fun when it works, and it's part of the hobby is just hacking away at building stuff and hauling it out the field somewhere and throwing it out in a tree and making contact with some guy in New Zealand. So I think I'm about talked out here. Need to go get some liquid and get my voice a rest. And it was great fun, Bill and crew. And I'll say 73s and catch y'all later.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it very much.
All
Yeah,
right.
thanks a lot.
Thanks
Take
for all the
care.
cues, man.
Yeah, same. Thanks for the chases. See
Yeah.
you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is kind of delve into, what Steve was talking about kind of went verbatim into what I'm going to talk about, only I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in depth. Thank goodness it matched up. We have pretty much the same views on things. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm just going to give you my experiences in testing. I do the same kind of things that Steve does. I have an NFED sitting probably 7 feet away outside this window, and that's what I do all my chasing on. I don't use my CWT high power antennas or verticals or anything else. I use the same antenna that I activate with, and therefore I can do a lot of testing and RBN work at home, just like he does, and see what works and what doesn't. My recommendation would be not to listen to anybody, me or anybody else. If you think you want to try an antenna, erect it, and erect another one that you want to bounce it against. Be sure you do it at the same time so the propagation doesn't change. But hit the RBN network with it. Then you'll find out real quick how well it works. Okay? So, but you can listen to a lot of people's advice, and then in the end, you're going to have to make your own decisions, because there's a lot of good antennas. But as I tell a lot of my students here in CWA, I haven't found an antenna better at SOTA work, both in activations and at home overall, for a guy in an HOA. Now, if I had a tower at home, sure, that would be great, but I don't. So I just use the NFED. It works just fine. It works just fine. I work DX and things with it on mountaintops, just like Steve has. So you just have to understand. We'll get to that point in here in a minute. Let me do another share screen and get our pictures up here that I'm going to talk about. Let's see, share screen. See, we'll get it up here in a minute. All right. We'll talk a little bit about SOTA first in general. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yep.
We should be, okay. This is the homepage for Summits on the Air. And if you're interested in getting more information about SOTA or anything like that to get involved with it, go to their webpage and read that. New to SOTA, and if you read that, it'll tell you different places to go. Click on joining in there in the blue, and it answers all your questions that you're going to need to know. Doesn't cost any money at all. All you got to do is follow the directions in there, and you're going to be a chaser and or an activator. So let's move on here pretty quick. There's, again, as I said, there's different methods to activate. You can, go totally lightweight. You can go heavyweight. It just depends on what you want to haul on your back. Or if you're just driving up in a car, you can take anything you want, just about. The caveat being you can't operate it out of the car or anything like that. But the fact there, FAQs, will answer all those kind of questions on what you can do with SOTA. So I highly recommend you go to that website. Next, Steve was talking about spotting and activating alerts. And this is SOTA Watch. And just about any time of the day, you can click on SOTA Watch 2 on the website. And gosh, you'll find out who's on the air, where they are, and you can also find out the upcoming activations. Who's going to be on the air next Thursday? So you can find that out. And you can, if you want to work them, you can wait until that time. They'll generally, you can see here, they'll list the different bands that they're going to be on. So you can just kind of hang out and hopefully, propagation will favor you and you can pick up some points. This is a snapshot, so it's not going to work, but normally if this was live on the air, I would hover over this and I could tell how many points that peak was worth. So maybe that would be a 10-point peak. Who knows? It's a 001, but it's in Carolina, so who knows? But we can tell here by the reference number, this tells us what peak it is. So if I go up on a peak, let's say here in Tucson, Mount Lemmon right here, I have to tell people where I am. And the way I tell them, I don't say I'm on Mount Lemmon. There may be 10 Mount Lemmons in the world, right? So they need to know exactly where I am. So I would say I would be W7A, W7 in the 7th call area, A being in Arizona, and then AW being Western Arizona. We're nearing it down in that 001, the highest peak in that area. So I would tell my chasers that, and then I would start running the pileup. And every once in a while, I would kind of ID myself and also the peak. So everybody knows where I am and who they're working. And this will be a live feed. This changes all the time. And then if I wanted to activate, I could click here. Once I log in, you can create an account, doesn't cost anything, and log in. I'm going to be on such and such a peak next Tuesday at 1700 Zulu. And that will alert people on next Tuesday, on the lookout for me at 1700 Zulu. And you'll get these points of whatever peak I'm on. We'll just kind of skim over this, but there's a lot of information, and there's also blogs. You can ask questions, give people answers. This is an interesting one here. What's the hardest one-pointer? What's the hardest one-pointer for anybody to activate? And I'll tell you what, the points almost mean nothing as far as how hard things are. And one-pointer can be very hard. And I was lucky enough to talk to the activator on Devil's Tower, NM5S. That's a straight up and down technical climb. I think he only made 7 contacts, and I was lucky enough to be one of them. So it's kind of like a little VX kind of thing. That's a pretty cool thing to work the top of Devil's Tower, right? So, and that's a 1-pointer. So don't let the points always deter you from working the low point ones. As you go along, if you work 1,000 different points worth of activators and you're a chaser at home, then you can be a sloth. It's 1,000 points. On counter to that, if you're an activator and you accumulate 1,000 points, you can be a mountain goat, which is much harder. So it's a lot of fun to participate in SOTA. Now let's get back in. Now we're going to start talking about what you guys want to hear about probably. This is from KX0R, and he's one of the ones that was my mentor, and also Steve when I first started. And what he says pretty much correlates with what I do now. Now you can read this. It says, I miss some S2S. This S2S is a summit to summit, which is a very desirable thing. If you're on top of a mountain and you hear somebody else on top of a mountain somewhere else, you work them and you get extra points for that. Because I can't copy the other activator, he says. Some weak signals are due to propagation. Yeah, we buy into all that. See, QRN, high signals, QSB can do it too. But some activators have weak signals. And they have weak signals all the time. They have weak signals. They use inefficient antennas, lossy matching networks, and don't try to put out a weak signal. Their RBN spots tell a story. Look at the RBN, the reverse beacon network. It'll tell you how strong you are in getting out into different areas of the country, or the world for that matter. It's a way not to log a lot of chasers. This I can't hear you. So if you just want to log 4 chasers and blow off the top of the mountain, then that's fine. You get your points, but you know the chasers are kind of left holding the bag a little bit. You know, we like to work those people too, but sometimes you know they have to leave because of the weather conditions and all that. So we understand that. Let's see. Yeah, it's an S2S chaser. This is very frustrating, and it is for the chaser at home too, when it's a weak signal. So anyway, he was talking about here, this whole thing is talking about the S2S Madness event where we activated in Arizona a bunch of 10-point peaks all at one time. There was a lot of points flying around to be worked, and it was a lot of fun. But this is the crux of what we're going to be addressing in SOTA systems tonight. Now, this is a color picture. I made it into a black and white one so you can see it a little bit better. This is an end-fed halfway. And you can see I'm using 2 poles. Now, again, I'm driving up. This is a drive up. This is Carroll Springs, the last one I did. The blue line is actually the wire. This is 26 gauge wire. It's looped through the top end of this SOTA pole that I use. It's fiberglass poles, 18 feet tall. Coming across here, 66 feet long. And before it goes through this other pole and down, now you could use a tree. If there was a tree out here, you could just throw this end up in the tree. One of the things that you want to do is keep this high. You won't get as good a radiation pattern if you let this thing droop down here, and I would attach this to the bush. Would it work? You betcha it would work. I could put this antenna on the ground and it'll work, okay? I'm talking about maximizing signals here. We'll get into why it works when I lay it on the ground a year later, but this is a maximum way to erect this antenna for the best possible radiation. So what I do is I tie onto the end of this wire here. This is just a piece of fishing line. Goes straight down here, and I tie it, in this case, I tied it onto the bush. There's a little catenary to it, and it was a big wind blowing left to right in this picture, and but it stayed up fine. And notice I don't have this thing taped, the wire, I don't have it taped onto this pole down here. This is free. This is at least a foot out from the pole all the time. Now, at the base of this is another piece of fishing line with a strain relief. And the reason being, on an end fed, you'll connect this directly to your tuner. The wire's direct, no coax, just like Steve said, no loss. Coax means loss. May be small loss, but you definitely don't want to run 20, 30 feet of coax to your antenna because you're just dropping too much. And at QRP levels, you can't afford that kind of loss. You know, we want to work people here. So I'll show you what that looks like here in real life with that strain relief. But the strain relief is right here. The wire then comes up and attaches onto my, this is a little table here. It came up here and attached directly to the tuner right in here. So the reason you want to use the strain relief is if you attach this wire directly to here, to your rig, to your tuner, the wind comes up and it launches it. You don't want that to happen. So that strain relief is a fantastic little item to have, and it costs nothing. You can make it at home out of a piece of wood or PVC or whatever you want to use. But that's what it looks like when it's erected.
Question.
Yeah.
Now he was saying at the end of that infed, you're going to have like 4,500 ohms impedance. How can you connect that directly to a tuner and make it I mean, I guess some tuners could do it, but it seems like most couldn't.
Stand by.
Okay.
I will answer
All right.
that question. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
Now, let's talk about this. We're talking about impedances. Here's the impedances that manifest themselves on this 66-foot end fed, the one you just saw. So if I get on 60 meters, it's 436 ohms. An end fed at half wavelength. In other words, this is 66 feet, half a wavelength is on 40 meters, okay? Whatever that half wavelength is cut for, it's going to be the highest impedance of all the bands that you got. And in this case, it's a half-wave 40-meter end fed, 2,770 ohms impedance. And my poor rig is looking for 50 ohms. It's going, And even if you hook this on to a KX3, had a nice tuner in it, 10-to-1 tuner, will not handle it, okay? So we're going to talk about how to handle it. And that's the key to these end feds. You want to be able to handle that impedance matching, because if you don't, you're going to have a heck of a lot of loss in SWR. But you'll see that as we keep going here. I want to make sure that I didn't skip one here. Yeah, we skipped a very important one. Okay, this is something that's very interesting to look at. This is the antenna current in that end fed. This is why this thing works so well. Now, if you were to take, this is a wires, okay? Wire 1 and wire 2 are really the same wire. This is just for modeling purposes, but this is one wire. This is your antenna wire. Okay, this is your counterpoise wire right here. Now, if we were to take a vertical, now I like verticals. I've got one in the backyard. I use it for high power stuff all the time. It's a great DX antenna. Low takeoff angle. In other words, you know, you want to, for DXing, you want a takeoff angle that's very low. You don't want something that goes up like this. More hops, more loss, bad news. So for DX, you want very low takeoff angle like that. Less hops. You can get farther, work better DX. The only problem is sometimes you can't work things very close to you either. So here with the end fed, we got the best of both worlds. We got a vertical element right here. We got a horizontal element right here. Now, think about if I use the vertical. I wouldn't have this part right here, this horizontal part. So I would just have vertical. You can see what the current does. The current in a vertical, even a quarter wave vertical, is high right at the base, right where you're sitting. That's where the most antenna current is. That's where the business is taking place. And at resonance on a quarter wave vertical, it has the least amount at the highest point. Okay? And that's probably one of the reasons why it has a nice low takeoff angle, because that's where the power is coming out here. Now, what's nice about the end-fed is we get some antenna current at the highest peak of the antenna on the horizontal part. This is really nice out here. Okay? And don't, like Steve said, you know, he felt a tingle a little bit. Well, when you're running high power SOTA on activation, you're running 100 watts, 60 watts, drop that baby down on 60 meters and you'll feel more than a tingle. So the way to get rid of those tingles is to use a counterpoise. The counterpoise always goes in the direction of your favorite direction that you want to work. Like here, we want to work to the northeast. We want to, you know, what we would like to do is, you know, work the East Coast. And so we point our counterpoise directly at them. So that's when you get to the peak, you always want to have a compass with you. I mean, if you had a vertical, you stick it up, it doesn't matter. But when you've got an end-fed, you best have a compass with you. And you'll find out why as we go along. But this is a real important thing to see. You can see what matters here. Now, if I didn't have this counterpoise, oh, you don't need a counterpoise with an end-fed. Baloney. On some bands, you don't. A lot of bands, you do. Now, if I didn't have this, guess where all this current would be? Right here. Right in your key, right in you, right in your rig. That's not fun, and it's not effective. So you want to use that counterpoise. I guess that's all I have to say about that part. Move on. And then we get in, this is what our problem is. And what are the aspects? What are the positive aspects for an end-fed? One, and the number one aspect is the high impedance. And it's also the number one bad aspect. And I'll tell you why here. High Z, to minimize ground losses. We want to minimize ground losses. Now, let's go back here. The closer I get to this ground, say this was a dipole. So we got a side here, a side out here. The closer we get to this ground, if it's closer than a half wavelength, it's a big capacitor here. What's a capacitor? Two plates separated by dielectric. Dielectric is air. You've got the plate up here being the wire. The other plate is the ground down here. So the closer you get to the ground, the more coupling you're going to have. You're going to lose RF that way too. So dipoles are great. Dipoles, if you can get them up a half wavelength, 20 meters, 30 feet. If you can do that on top, both ends, 30 feet. If you can do that on the top of a peak, great. But that's not always feasible to do at all. And 40 meters, forget it. You know, that's really high. So another reason why the end-fed is really good. It's easy and light to carry. It has, again, as I said before, both vertical and horizontal polarization. It's multi-band. This one, this particular 66 foot, I can work 60 through 6 meters, every band in between, okay, with a special tuner or with a 49 to 1 auto transformer, and we'll get into those too. So they have more gain than verticals. Verticals are omnidirectional, they have no gain. Low dipoles have less gain. If you can get a dipole up high at that half wavelength, you're looking at 6 dB or more gain, which is a good deal. That's what you want. But the problem is height. That's why we're back down to this end-fed type of antenna. They're cheap to make. All you need is the wire. Quentin and I talk about it all the time. You know, we should go into business. People pay $75 for a hunk of wire and some connectors on it. They're very simple. I'll show you one here in a minute. And the negative aspect of it is the same thing as one of the positive aspects. It's high Z, it's hard to match, and you need a wide range tuner greater than 10 to 1, or an auto transformer to do it. So let's go on a little bit further here. Now, let's look at this radiation pattern. What do these things look like? Now, there's a 52. This is George. Let's see. This is what George recommends, a 52 or a 66. He uses a 66 most of the time, I think. That's what he said anyway. This is what it looks like on 40 meters. So we don't have to worry on 40 meters so much. And if you use that 66, we're looking at over 6 dB gain at 18 feet tall, 66 foot. 6 dB gain plus is pretty darn good. So you're looking at say if you have 5 watts QRP, so that's 10 watts, that's 20 watts effective radiated power. 20 watts, okay? Effective radiated power, if you had a vertical, it would be, your 5 watts, because there's no gain to it. So that's what it would look like on 40 meters. Next, now starts to get interesting. Here's 30 meters. Look what it's doing. It's starting to look like a dipole, and it's starting to get more gain to it. We're not omnidirectional anymore, and we're starting to branch out here. So again, we need our compass to make sure that we orient our end-fed in the correct direction. Now, in this case, the X in each one of these, in the 66 or 52, would be your radial. That's the favored direction. And in this case, with the radial in the X direction is also the highest radiation point of the antenna too. So that's a good thing. But if you were looking at, let's say I'm looking at working the northeast and orient this towards the northeast, which kind of it would be going. And what's nice about it is, guess what? This is the northeast. Way down here, you know where that is? ZL. Remember? Steve talked about working. That's one of the holy grails of working in SOTA. Did you work New Zealand today? Well, this happens to be pointing directly at New Zealand right here. So now you're covering the Northeast and you're covering New Zealand. Pretty good deal. Okay, so that's on 30 meters. Now it starts to get a little funky. Look at this. 52-foot end-fed is still keeping much of its shape. Looks pretty good. The 66 is starting to go a little bit wonky, but still has good gain. But you can see some of the highest points of radiation are now a little bit off the X point. So now you might want to adjust your setup a little bit more towards the northeast, to cover that. So that's what it looks like on 20 meters. What are the differences between, obviously there's difference in radiation pattern. This really, the 66 really covers the low bands well. The fifth, and it's hard to match. That 40 meters is hard to match. The first time end-fed user, I would recommend the 52-foot, easy to match. I'm not saying it has low impedance by any shakes, but it doesn't have as high of an impedance as the 66. You won't get the gain on 40 that you will, though, with the 66. But the 52 is a great antenna, and easy, probably the easiest one to put up. Okay, next. There's the hitch.
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa. So hook on your 10 to 1 tuner and see how that works. It won't do it. So we got 20 meters. This is this happens to be the 52-foot, 20 meters, 18.4 to 1. We got a matching problem here. We got some reactance to deal with. So, and it's that way. This is not the worst band. This is not 40 meters. 40 meters, we'd be much higher than that. Okay, let's go on further. This is 15 meters, your DX band. Now, this is a good DX antenna, the way its radiation pattern goes, because guess what? That has a radiation pattern very much like a 4-square. And as 4-square, I can tell you from personal experience, kills DX on 40 for sure. Great antenna, and it's a low antenna, easy to put up. This has the same type of radiation pattern. It covers the 4 cardinal directions if you put it up right. You'll want to point this towards the northeast. This goes to ZL, South Pacific. This goes to Japan. This goes to the Caribbean. Voila! That's pretty nice. Now, we don't generally talk in those terms in SOTA. That's a DX kind of a thing that you'd be looking at. But hey, if we ever get propagation back, stuff like that can happen. Okay, let's go on. Now, here we go. This is a setup, and we're going to go through. I'm already even looking at my notes because I know these things so well. This is one of the first activations. You notice I've got the KX2 there. I've got a little board that Keith led me onto that he used to mount those things on. Now remember, this was actually a hike. That board is a little heavy probably, but it's a good one, and it's not very flimsy. You can buy them at Walmart, I don't know, for 10 bucks maybe. They're cutting boards, what they are. And there's a watch there, so I can log easily. And I got a little palm pico paddle that I use. You notice there's no tuner here. Not good. But I do have one thing going for me, and I'm bringing the wire of the infed directly in here. But there's no strain relief. I remember this. This was Benedict, I think. And it tends to want to lift this whole board up. Not good, not good. Okay, so we're learning, we're learning. Let's go on and see how we evolve here. Now, we're evolving by, we need a tuner. We need a better than a 10-to-1 tuner. And guess what this tuner is? This is the actual tuner that George, KX0R, uses. This is his tuner. This is his picture. Homebrew. He uses banana clips for different impedance matching. You can do different things with this tuner, even more than other tuners. It has, as I'll show you here, let's look at the guts of it a little bit. Homebrew tuner, the transformer itself is a special transformer that's picked, in this case, the mix is picked for higher bands. It works really well from 30 meters on up. He uses a different mix for the low bands. In his discussion, he said, there's no one tuner that fits all, because here's the loss part right here. This baby here is your loss. The more coils you use to make this impedance transformation, the more loss you're going to have. Because if you get so much loss, when you run high power, these things get hot, really hot. A kilowatt and a half, these things will really get hot. So you want to use the least amount of area as you can. He's got interleaved primary into the secondary. The green wire is the primary, and the brown wire is the secondary. Each one of these turns almost has a tap on it. So you can tap off any part of this coil, the primary and the secondary. So he can mix and match all these different things to null out that reactive component of the infed and get it down to a 1-to-1 match, a perfect match. And he uses only the amount of toroid inductance that he needs to do that, no more. Because normally, if you didn't have taps, most of them don't have taps. Most of them you can't adjust the inductor at all. You adjust the two capacitors, input and output capacitors. These are polyvaricons. So say you got too much inductance, so you just need a little bit more capacitance to null that out. But now you're throwing away power in the toroid itself. So only use what you need of this, not all of it all the time. These resistors here are part of his built-in SWR indicator, so he can tune it for low power. On the lower bands, now you need to add more capacitance. And so he's got some fixed capacitors in here that he can switch in. That's what all those switches are on the front panel. Switching in capacitance in and out for the low bands, like 60 meters, 80 meters, stuff like that. So he's got total flexibility in this tuner. That's his key. That's why he's always loud. Everybody that works him, that's why they don't like to work George, KX0R. He's 99% of the time, he's pretty loud. Now, here's the next best. You just saw the best. There's no one that makes that tuner. You got to make it yourself. I've got all the parts to make one this winter. I hope I can make it. This is what we're using right now, and I can thank Quentin for this. He found this tuner from 4-state QRP. And it comes the closest that I've found to duplicating that. Now, what I've done here is I've repackaged this. This comes in, the box actually is made out of like circuit board material. And Quinn and I think we're on Aztec Peak. And again, before we did the strain relief, launched this thing and broke one of the panels on the enclosure. I don't think it hurt the tuner any. But anyway, I thought, well, I'll repackage this. And I would like to have, my RF in is fine. I have some switchable capacitance like George does. I talked to George a little bit. Yeah, you need to, in 60 meters and all that, it's nice to flick that in and get a little bit more, because these polyvaricons don't have enough capacitance just by themselves. If I left it in and tried it on 20 meters, I couldn't get a good tune, so I can switch it out. Here's the key right here. This is switchable on the turns on the toroid. On the output, as I remember, and you'll see that here in a minute. Also has a built-in SWR meter, not meter, but lights. These are lights. And also, normally they come with a banana plug that you can use in these jacks for your antenna. So the wire for the infed, right in here, directly, no coax, no nothing. It's the wire of the antenna goes right in here. That's why you need that strain relief. You don't want to launch this box with the wind. Your counterpoise goes right in here, right? Easy peasy, no sweat. Down here, if you want to use a BNC out in the coax, you can. I don't know if I've ever used that, but I put that capability in it. Here's what the guts look like. Now, they do it a different way, but it's kind of the same situation here. We've got a toroid, a whole bunch of turns on it. In this case, we're not using banana plugs. They're using a switch. In each one of these turns, you can see it's soldered to the different points of the switch. So I can just turn that switch. Whoops, went the wrong way. Turn this switch anywhere I want, and get the correct amount of inductance for that match, to match that out. This will match that 66 foot down to 1-to-1 on 40 meters. It'll do it. So that was the key. That's pretty much what it looks like. It's on a circuit board. You can tell it's a kit. They're fairly inexpensive. I think they're around $50 or something like that. Now, this is Quentin. We're up on Mingus here, operating very fast because the storm's coming in. This is our current setup, my current setup anyway. You can see here, now we've got the KX2. Now we've got that tuner mounted right here. There is a piece of coax at 1 foot. That's the only coax in the whole system. And that's a piece of WG0AT. That's not some flimsy, thin stuff. So I try to minimize losses any way I possibly can. But I need to get the output of this into the tuner. I bypass the tuner that's already in this rig, so I'm not using it. I'm using totally this. Goes into the input here. It's tuned here. You can see the wire coming in. and the counterpoise coming in. This is the counterpoise. Now, we also added this. Every band has a setup. So when we want to QSY to a different band, all we got to do is, it'll have a number. The toroid, I think, has a letter and then another number. So it could be a 3F4, something like that. So we can pre-tune this, boom, boom, boom. The KX2 has a readout directly of SWR. We can just hit tune there and do some micro adjustments on it, and we're set to go. Always less than 1.5 to 1. Usually 1.2 to 1, 1.3 to 1, sometimes 1 to 1. It's just, it's not going to make that much difference.
Is the length of the counterpoise important? I mean, does it need to change from the band to band?
Yes, it is. Sometimes you really don't need one, but usually we use, I think I use a 12-foot counterpoise, I think it is. Now, on 60 meters, I have a paper on this and I can send it out. I got a lot of papers on this antenna, way more in depth than I'm talking about here. I've done some actual measurements of the coax. This is on the home SOTA station using the infed here at 66 foot. And so I use a coax coming back in here. So I use a antenna current meter, put it around this coax, and so I can measure what's coming back in here. For instance, the maximum amount of antenna current could be like 350 ohms that or 350 ohms, 350 milliamps of antenna current for low power situations. That's the maximum. If you had a 1-to-1, 350 milliamps would be going out into that antenna to radiate. That's a good thing. That's what you want. Okay, 30 meters, 17 meters, 60 meters. Bad bands to match. 60 meters, for instance, the amount of return current coming back in a piece of coax without a counterpoise on it is about 120 milliamps out of your about 320. It's going to light up this stuff. It's lighting up your key, and it's lighting you, and it's not being radiated. So yeah, so what I do is on 60 meters, same 66-foot infed, directed the same way, but I use a quarter wave on 60 meters. It's long, it's like, I don't know, 40, 50 feet long, what it works out to be. It took that 120, what did I say, 120 ohms, milliamps of antenna current, busted that down to about, I don't know, what's like 15 milliamps, something like that, nothing. So, and now it's going out into the counterpoise, and it's very important that you keep the counterpoise above the ground. Everything is always above the ground all the time, because you want to minimize that ground loss, okay? So keep it like, put it on a bush or something. 2 feet off the ground is fine. So, now, let's go over to QRO situation. What do you want to do if you run power? You can rack up a lot of contacts running power. So here's the situation here, and this is kind of like the first picture of the QRP end of it. Okay, we've got KX2, we've got the KXPA 100 right down here, 10-to-1 tuner in it. Antenna wire coming directly into the 10-to-1 tuner. Oh yeah. Did it work? Yeah. Was it hard on the amp? Yeah. On certain bands it sure was. Can you make Qs? I made 80 Qs on that peak. So power works. And I kind of, for me, I generally like to make a lot of Qs. It's fun. Now, see this little guy here, that's an N0SA key. It's a metal key. And this is the first time I felt the wrath of 60 meters. Because on a metal key, you're going to feel all that antenna current coming back on 60 meters. So I decided I had to do something about it, and that's why I came up with that quarter wave and works great. Pretty strong signals on 30 meter or 60 meters. Yeah, 30 meters is another hard one. Now, QRO. This will work QRP, QRO. Everybody says, you know, well, just put a 9-to-1 balun on it. And this is a 9-to-1. Actually, it's a 9-to-1 un is the correct term. This is a homebrew one. And this is the magic box. This is what's not talked about a whole lot, and I don't know why. It's a 49-to-1 auto transformer. It's wound differently. You can see the wire. The primary wire is wound, or the coil is wound on one side, comes back over here, and then opposite way, it's wound on the secondary. And there's also, don't ever forget this capacitor. This is a 100 puff capacitor. It has to be like 3 kilovolts, even if you're only running 100 watts. So that's what a 49-to-1 looks like. Let's look at it closer. You can see they're easy to build, no big deal. This is number 12 magnet wire. And again, that 100 puff capacitor across. Now, this is the same. This is the setup that was originally on the Carroll Springs activation I just did with the end-fed antenna that you saw that picture of. This was my setup. This is my final solution for QRO activations. We've got a KX2. We can't use that tuner anymore. That tuner can only handle 20 watts. I was putting out anywhere from 60 to 80 watts here. So the tuner is gone. So what are we going to do now? We know this tuner won't handle it. This guy will. This guy will break it down to where it's in the vicinity in the 2-to-1 range. This will easily handle that stuff on any band. This is a magic box. You got it. If you're interested in doing this, if you're interested in QRO end-fed, anything higher than 20 watts, that's your baby right there that you need to build. You can buy them. My Antennas makes them. I think they're 60, 70 bucks, but you can make them a lot cheaper than that. I have some YouTube videos that are real easy. You can build one step by step, no problem. So what we've got here is we've got a coax, small piece of coax. Now, I'm willing to make some losses here because I got QRO, I got power. I don't need every last watt of my 80 watts going out into that end-fed anymore. You know, I can do pretty well, you know, if I just have 70 watts going out there. So what we've got is coax running out. It's running into the input of the amp right here. Okay, and the output of the amp hooks in to the input of this 49-to-1 transformer. And what do we have here? We have wires here, and we got a wire. You can't see it very well here, but there's another wire coming in here. The counterpoise wire is here, and this is it coming in. You just kind of lose it in the black, but this is the counterpoise coming in off the ground. This is the antenna wire coming in off the strain relief. Same thing, banana plugs right in there. You can see it again. Here's the antenna wire, and right there is the banana plug right there for the counterpoise. So excellent thing to do. Could you use this with QRP and eliminate the tuner? Sure you could. Works the same way, but remember, toroids are not as efficient as KX0R's tuner is. So you're going to lose efficiency anywhere from 70 to 90% on toroids. So you're going to lose there. And I'm not willing to lose that on QRP, not ever. So, but I am on QRO stuff. So this is the box I use QRO. I use a tuner. Put the tuner back here for QRP stuff. Of course, down here there's two. These are just washers, and it's a magnetic mount here. So Same setup down here. Let's go on further. Now, this is a really versatile antenna infid. And I have a paper written on this. And this is exactly what I use here at home, 10 feet away from me. 66 foot happens, let me come to my notes here. We're going to try and use the 66 foot on 80 meters. 80 meters. Well, how in the world are we going to do that? Because if you use that 49-to-1 auto transformer, it's going to break that impedance down to in the single digits. Way too low. Way too low. So we don't need that 49-to-1 anymore. But we do need it on other. Why am I here? We do need this on other bands. This is just for 80 meters. We don't need it. So what we do is 66 feet happens to be nicely a quarter wave on 80 meters. Cool. Up in Denver, I use this on 160 and 80 meters, inverted L's. So all we do is use a relay that can handle some power, because I use this for power too. And switch out the 49-to-1. So we bring the antenna wire in, and we bring in a counterpoise, 66 foot long. Now we've got an inverted L on 80. A plain old inverted L. So, and it'll get you on the air. Is it a really efficient antenna low like that? No. But it gets you on the air. It'll make cues. I've used it in CWTs. It works. And I've run, this is a My Antennas 49-to-1 auto transformer. This is the one you can buy. But I've run 500 watts through that. So it works. Next. This is how I do things here, doing a little experiments. Because I have it at home on the patio there. I can take my SOTA stuff out there, and I encourage you all to do this, do this stuff at home, do a backyard activation, run the RBN network. All you got to do is call CQ, your call. It'll pick it up, hopefully, and it'll tell you the signal strength and where it picked it up at. And you can do little adjustments, on counterpoises, what works, what doesn't. I can tell you one thing on that first QRP activation we did, and I was just using the 10-to-1 in the KX2. All it could do on 17 meters with I think that was a 52 foot that we used on that. All it could do was an 8-to-1 match. So yeah, will the antenna match the infid? Well, less than 10-to-1. Yeah, if you want to run 8-to-1, yeah, you're not very efficient. You're not going to make very good amount of cues with it. So you need to do, use this tuner. Set it up at home, because it's the same way, just like Steve said. He does a lot of home stuff, and he transfers it onto the peak, and it's really close to what he experiences on the peak. So how did I make up this is probably what I was doing, making up what are the adjustments I have here. Okay, so 40 meters, then I write it down. What are these settings? So when I get on the peak, boom, boom, I can QSY really quick. Okay, so a lot of things you could do at home like this, and make yourself more efficient on the peak itself. So, anybody have any questions? This is, I think, the last.
Just wondering if when you get up on the peak and you set up the antenna, if the conditions are a little different, do you find that those settings might not, I guess they'd be close?
They'd be very close. And what we do is, you can see when you're transmitting, you can have an SWR reading right here. And all you got to do is just tweak. That's why I want this close to me, if I can possibly help it. Because it's easy. I can just reach over there, do a little final tweak. This tweaks it right down. Boom, boom, I'm on the air.
Okay.
Easy.
Question, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, two questions. So a 52 foot or 66 feet with a 12-foot counterpoise pretty much covers, 40, whatever. And then my other question is, you've never mentioned battery. Do you want to cover that a little bit?
Yeah, I use bioenno batteries. They work really well. I use I think Keith, I think he uses a what, 9 amp hour battery, something like that. I use a 12 because I drive up. He has to haul his battery, so it's tough. But usually when Quentin and I go out, I have a 4.5 amp hour battery, and he and I can both activate a peak, maybe 2 peaks in a day, both of us off that. And I really like those batteries, and they're safe. They have the cell equalizer all built into them. They're a little more expensive, but they're safe. I've seen pictures of those things going off in the pack, and believe me, you don't want that to happen to you. Not at all.
This is a lithium battery, though?
It's a, what is it, Quentin? It's a
Lithium phosphate.
Lithium phosphate, yeah. Okay, thank you.
let me show you. These are my antennas. Ready to go because I'm going to Mingus the day after tomorrow. 52-foot end fed with the 12-foot counterpoise on it. That's all it is. It's light as a feather. 26 gauge wire man. Now, I want to show you one thing. All this is the strain relief. Quentin's has it on his antennas too. There, let's get in here. Just a piece of wood is all it is. And it's got 3 holes in it. It's got some tape on one end of it. I'll take it off, I think. Yeah. I don't want to unstring the whole antenna here to show you, but this piece will go to the ground, okay? And you can tie it around a rock. This is just a piece of fishing line. Tie it around a rock. I use a little spike in the ground, anything to hold it down. This takes the strength of the tension of the antenna. And then you can see here, there we go. It's got 2 other holes, and the antenna wire goes in and out of them. So the tension is in this piece of wood. You've got the end of the wire coming out of the other hole, and it goes to your rig. So the antenna now, when the wind comes up, it's going to pull on this string really hard. And you got some slack string, or slack wire coming out to the rig itself. So I tell you, it's a handy thing when you get into some wind situations, and it's easy to put up. Also, I'll show you a 66 foot. Let me put this away here. And the 66 foot, I like the low bands, always did, from my DXing days. I was a 160 kind of guy. But this is what I use. This is my 60 meter counterpoise. When I'm really serious and I want to make some low band contacts, and I like low band contacts, this is just the counterpoise. I'll put this up on a driveway marker, or lay it over bushes. That's fine. Keep it off the ground. Okay. Now here's the 66 foot. This is the whole antenna and the small counterpoise that goes with it, the 17 foot or so. That's it. Oh, you know why you can't see this? It's green color, and I have a green screen in the back of me.
Oh,
So it
yeah.
kind of cancels it out. So now look at this. The wire is just standing out straight, but the red banana plug is the antenna. The black one I just keep as the counterpoise. Where's that? Here it is. Over here is the counterpoise, which is ringed in black. So it just tells me which is which. And they work out really well. There's a strain relief on this one too. Handy thing. So that's generally the antenna. The only reason I would put up that 52, and I really like that 52, but if you had, like on top of Pistol Hill here, it's a small peak. 66 foot is pretty long, so the 52 foot works better on that. There's also, George has, this is another thing to do. Say you just have your 66 foot. Let's see if I can find it here. Here it is. Jumper. Guess where that jumper is in the 66 foot? 52 feet. All I got to do is pull this plug. These are actually RC racing car plugs. Just pull that plug and you got a 52 foot. All in one. That's what you want to do. They're great antennas. They work out well. Let's see, what else? I think that does it for the antennas. Anybody got any question on the antennas? Covered it pretty good. I've got anybody that's really interested in these things and wants to know the ins and outs and what the currents are on the counterpoises and all that kind of thing. I got papers on that. A lot of papers I've written, and I can forward those on to you. Just send me an email. I'm good in QRZ, and I'll forward them on in the email. Now the other thing I use the KX2, as you can see. I always try to take. Oh, hang on just a minute. I'll be right back. You had to ask a good question. And I thought about doing this and didn't incorporate it, but being that you asked the question, what kind of list do you have before you go out to make sure you've done everything? I can't say how much important this is, because it really is. Check the watch. You know that little watch I have? This is the, Keith knows these very well. Okay, that's the cutting board that I use. And notice all these little pads and things. Well, I don't need those for the all of them for the KX2. This does all kinds of things. All different kinds of rigs can be put on this thing, and depending on what I want to do. But anyway, let's get back to this list. Check the watch. The watch that goes on for the one I log with. I want to make sure that's dead nuts on the time, down to the second. I have a little, the atomic clock here. I synchronize with that. Everything's cool. Camera. I take a little separate camera. Is it charged? 2-meter radio. Do I need that? If I do, put it in and charge it. Rig. You need the rig. Make sure that's in. Make sure your batteries are charged. All those bio-NOs. And the other type batteries that we use for when I really want to go light, I use this guy. This is an MTR Mountaintop Radio 5 band. And I use that when I want to go light. This is back to our show and tell thing. And that all fits into something like that. That has earplug, dual earplugs. I like to take a separate set of earplugs. If those are flimsy wires on them, if they break, now what? In this case, you don't have a speaker. You're dead. Has the paddles in here, the DC wire down to the batteries in here. So everything's good to go there. Same way with the KX2, I've got dual earbuds in there. So anyway, make sure your batteries are charged. Check the cell phone. Holy mackerel, check the cell phone. And guess what? I'll add something else in here. This has caught me 2 times. Probably will catch me again, but I sure hate it when it does. I have an Android cell phone, and sometimes they update the, what is it? SOTA, not SOTA Goat, is it? Anyway, the Android one, where I get my spots on the cell phone. You want to take one of those. But sometimes they'll upgrade that. And if you get caught out there when after they've upgraded it and you haven't upgraded it, you may not get spot. So make sure, do a test spot on the SOTA watch before you go to make sure this stuff works, okay? Do that and make sure your cell phone is charged. If you're going to go on a multi-day, take one of those little USB chargers for your cell phone and charge those so you can recharge your cell phone. Make sure you got the tuner. You don't want to go out there without your tuner. A hat. Make sure you have your hat, wristwatch, sunglasses, and my regular prescription glasses. All this is written down. I guess old guys need this, right? Walking poles. Make sure you got the walking poles if you're going to hike. Obviously, when I don't hike, I don't take the poles. Stool and stick. Well, however you're going to sit, make sure that's covered. If you get just a pad and you sit on the ground, then you need the pad. Let's see. Oh, an antenna analyzer. I don't need this for the KX2. I don't take one. But if I take the Mountain Topper, I need one. So I can adjust my tuner because it doesn't have a SWR indicator on it. Okay. And make sure, again, I have written down lunch, water. Jesus, in Arizona, you better take a lot of it. Make sure you have your water, lunch, and you put in your batteries. Make sure that you not only charge your batteries, but you put it in your pack or have it set right by your pack so you don't forget it. That's my checklist. And a map. Map of the area that you're going in is always nice. And also the antenna setup. Make sure you have things like, if you're going to run an end-fed, not a vertical or something like that, make sure you have a good compass in there so you can take some bearings. Find out, optimize your setting there. Don't just put it up in a convenient place. It may not be a convenient place to get it right, but do it right, Maybe you got to go through some brambles or something, but it'll pay dividends. It really will. So especially if you can get, if you get on 15 meters and you get that four-square effect on that end-fed, I mean, you're going to pick up the ZL that way. You're going to pick up the northeast. Well, guess what? If you got propagation, you're going to pick up more than the northeast. You're going to pick up Europe. So this is important stuff here. Okay. Anything I missed, Quentin? If you're still awake.
I am. Not sure about David though. No, not really. Pretty much covered everything. A lot of it is making sure, like your first activation you do is a drive up, and that way, if something goes wrong, you're not having to hike back out or whatever. You can take as much stuff as you want and make sure everything works before you really start hiking around and expending a lot of energy.
When Quinn and I go out, we have a good time. And I don't mean just having a good time. I mean, we are a team, a cohesive unit. A good example of that is when we went on Mingus and we were almost overrun by this giant thunderstorm that came through. You don't want to be up there in that thunderstorm, I'll tell you that. He had, tell them about your little thunder indicator, lightning indicator, Quentin. That's a handy thing to have if you value your life.
There we go. I guess it helps if I unmute. It was just a lightning indicator. You can get it off of Amazon for about 20 bucks. And another ham in town here who has a great interest in weather, talked to him about how far, or I should say, I guess, how close is too close when you start getting readings that lightning's in the area. And we were given the information that if it's 10 miles out then you better be packing up and getting off of wherever you're at, because the lightning thing gives you a distance from your position, you know, where the lightning is being detected at. So about 10 miles out, and actually on that mountain it was probably about 11 or 12 miles out when we finished up, packed up, and then you know, got everything back into the car.
Well, what's nice is when we go out, in that case, we had to get in and out fast. And we knew before we set up, it was coming in. And it turns out, because Quentin uses the exact same 52-foot end fed, it has all the same exact settings, you know, as mine does on a tuner. He uses the same tuner. So what happened was, he set up the end fed. I said, you go ahead and send up the end fed. I'll set up the gear. And boom, boom, everything went together perfectly. All the settings, you know, we could use with his antenna. And we were in and out of there. Both of us activated that peak, set up, activated it, both of us, and tore down in 20 minutes. Okay? So we were motating. We had good a good motivation to get the heck out of there, because we were the only one left on the peak. So we really have a team effort. We're like clockwork when we get on a peak, because we know exactly when we share. Sometimes we don't. We activate in separate areas. But
sounds like maybe you need to add to check the weather forecast to your list.
Yeah. Oh, I'm doing that right now with Mingus, and Mingus looks really good, and spruce. So yeah, I've been doing that for the past week, kind of moving it up and down. I'm trying to get the, you know, the monsoons are gone now, and so things are quieting down, but pretty soon, you know, it'll be snowy and stuff like that, so it'll be a different situation. Anything else?
You ever been skunked? I mean, no propagation.
That's huh? That's never, ever, never.
Wow.
That's one thing. Well, you know, you could be skunked by forgetting things and all that, but no, for any reason. But as far as, you know, a person that always takes his stuff versus another person that always takes his stuff, and he's a sidebander and I'm a CW kind of guy, or both, you know, he goes up there, you know, the question always is, well, am I going to get my 4? You know, I'm saying, am I going to get more than 30? That's my question. I don't even think about 4, you know. I mean, that's a given that you're going to get that, you know. I'll tell you, it's activating on CW, you go up there and you're, you know, you may be average Joe down here, but you go up on the top of a 10-point peak, you're the man. They want you real bad. So yeah, it's a pretty cool feeling. And that's why you need to really practice and, you know, study, you know, how to work pileups. How do you do that? What do you do when things slightly go wrong? Like Steve was saying, you know, you didn't get the report. What do you do? What happens? Here's one. What happens when you get 2 guys calling you back at once? Okay. So you pick one. You start sending his report. So you send his call, W1XYZ, your 599 break. Well, the other guy that was calling at the same time that you didn't pick, he didn't hear the call you came back to. So he thinks you came back to him. Now you had 2 guys. So now you hear 2 reports coming back to you. The one guy you actually called and the guy you didn't call, who thinks you did come back to him. What do you do? Well, you don't, normally you'd come back and you'll go break, you know, thank you 72 QRZ or whatever you want to do, something like that. You know, you don't put a call in. So what you do in that case is you want to put his call in again, so he knows, the other guy, the second guy knows that no, you didn't work him. You worked W1XYZ, not W2ABC. So things like that, it makes you a smoother operator. When you're first beginning, one of the ways to calm down these, what are we afraid of? I always talk about in class, the gorilla in the shack, the big gorilla in the shack, or on the mountain. Biggest gorilla in the shack in the mountain. Who is it? The gorilla that says, you will not run, you are afraid. Stay within your means and search and pounce and stay home. And we go, no, not anymore. You're out of here. So how do we work our way into that? Well, we had a student that Quentin and I took up to Mount Lemmon. And so what did we do with him? We told him, well, start on the low bands first. Fewer people calling. You have another option is to start with lower power. If you normally run 10 watts out of your KX2, run 5 watts or run 3 watts or something. Narrow it down, and then as you get more comfortable, bump it up a little bit. You'll get more people calling you then. Okay, so there's all kinds of little tricks of the trade that you can do to limit that kind of stuff. Now he chose, to his credit, he chose not to limit his power. He started on 60 meters. He made a few Qs and went to 40, but he was nervous. Will you be nervous? You can just tell yourself, no, you won't be nervous and everything's fine. No, you'll be nervous. You'll be nervous. But can you control that? They say that like in the Army, being a coward kind of thing. Well, yeah, everybody's afraid, but can you control being afraid? Can you control that? Can you control being nervous? And that's what you have to work on. That's mental power that you have to work with. But anyway, he worked his way up. Finally, we were almost ready to go to 20 meters, and he was dreading that because that's where you're going to get the bigger pileups generally. And so he said, can I stand up? And he was doing all kinds of gyrations and trying to limber up. And, he was like white knuckling it, boy, but he was doing a good job. He was locked on hard and doing a great job. So finally he called CQ, went through the pileup. So what generally do you do on your first activation? You make 10, 15, 20 Qs maybe. Had a pretty good activation for a first timer, right? He made 44. It ain't bad for the first time activator, yeah. CW activator. He was a sideband guy that wanted, more Qs. So he had done SOTA before, but that was his first CW. So there's probably a million other things, but it's getting late. And anybody else have any questions regarding SOTA? Anything you goats want to add, Keith? No? Everything's cool? We did all right? All right? All right, good. If Keith says, yeah, he has got some real good experience. I really look and respect him for what he's done. He is a good guy. Marathon runner. So he can get up these peaks. I've activated only one time with him, and that was on a drive up. But I could know in my wildest dreams I'm not in the same universe as Keith, okay? So that won't happen, but he's a great guy. He's a CW op, good CW operator. Yeah, there's a little, and Quentin, CW op. And of course, David doesn't do SOTA, I don't think yet, but CW op. So it's a good way to learn, I'll tell you. Between the CW op, CWA type of learning experience to learn CW, to do it the right way, not just learning the code. Like I say, that's a given. We have to learn how to use the code. If I tell you what ABC is and say, okay, go out and activate, and you don't know anything else, you're not going to be very successful, I don't think, because you don't know how to do it. So we need to teach this stuff in our classes. It doesn't have to be SOTA. It could be DXing, could be contesting. Doesn't matter what you guys like, but use CW. That's the point. and use it correctly in the way that you do it, because every contact is different. SOTA uses a different protocol than contesting, you know, than rag chewing, DXing. They're all a little bit different, but they still require you to be a good CW operator, to be really efficient and do a good job, you know, to make your 30, 40 contacts. And you can do that with 5 watts or 10 watts even. You know, I consider you to be, you know, doing your job, a good job, you know, and paying attention to your rig, making sure it's efficient. Loss is a killer. QRP, loss is an absolute killer. That's exactly what George is talking about. Activators that have weak signals, and they habitually have weak signals. I'm not mentioning any calls or anything like that, but I look at a call and say, well, as a chaser, I have about a 20 or 30% chance of working that guy. He's always weak no matter where he is, you know. Maybe he has different priorities. Maybe he just wants to do a few cues and get the points and get going. But from a chaser point of view, that's how I see it, you know. And so when I'm activating, that's why people like George and Steve, I mean, those guys are world popular. You know, when you stop Steve here, this guy is popular in the whole world. You know, it was great for him to come and talk with us tonight. But the reason that they're popular in the whole world is because they share their knowledge. For one thing, they shared it with me when I started. And they've been chasers. They know what it's like at home. So they operate in a way that would create more chasers. I think there's plenty of guys that just, you know, K0R, whenever he's on, I want to get him, you know, all the time, every day. Why? Because that guy is, and like Keith, that guy busted his butt to get to the top of that peak. Killed himself. He had fun doing it, but still, you got to respect that effort that he put in. He had to put up all that stuff, you know. So cut the activator a little slack too. There may be other circumstances, you know, weather circumstances or whatever that cause him to do things. But if there's none of those circumstances there, then try to feed the chasers, because they're going to feed you back. If you're nice to them, they're going to be nice to you, and they're going to be saying, okay, you know, when Keith comes on, I want to work him, you know, because it's a unique, maybe it's a, you know, it's a one-of-a-kind content, whatever reason. We're looking for those guys. The guy that goes out, oh, well, you know, I'm sorry, but I'm going to use this as a illustration, you know, a 2-meter guy on a peak, you know. The Colorado 14er event. There's so many guys up there that, and God bless them, you know, they're up there doing their thing. But that doesn't help me in Arizona working that peak, right? So if they just do 2 meters. So I say, you know, do your 2 meters, but also, you know, do some HF too, if you can. So be kind to others and they'll be kind unto you. Being kind unto you means there'll be more people chasing you. That's what you want, you know. You say, oh, wow, you know, there's Keith on the air, you know, and Keith has generated that kind of following. You have a following. You have a following. You really do. I don't, because I don't activate that much, but those kind of guys do, you know. So they know what to do. They know what they're doing. And so they're, even if they don't try, they're mentoring other people, because they say, wow, I'd like to do that. If I was fit, you know, yeah, I'd like to do what Keith does. I'd like to do what George does and hike 15 miles one way into a peak and activate it at 75 years old. Yeah, you got to respect that, you know, you really do. So there's other aspects of just learning CW. You know, it's this is a neat hobby. It really is. There's a lot to it, and one pathway to that respect is learning CW, because anybody that learns CW deserves respect. I don't care if they're 10 words a minute. They deserve it because they tried. They put a lot of effort into it, and they're trying to do the right thing. That's my pontification. Okay. So anybody else has some final comments? I'm talked out. Thank goodness.
Thanks so much.
Yep, thank you.
All right. It's good to see you guys. Thanks for coming. Really appreciated you all coming. This was kind of a first for our CWA thing, and it looks like it worked out pretty well, I think. We didn't really, or I didn't really advertise it too much because I didn't know how much, I didn't want 50 or 70. If I would have put this on Facebook that Steve was going to be here, holy mackerel, I don't know what I'd have had. But I don't know if Zoom would have handled it. But I think, we'll try and do this as we go along with contesting and DXing and different things. But it's good to hear from these guys, and I think they want to contribute. And Steve certainly did tonight. So thank him very much. Okay, I'll say 73, and you guys have a great weekend, okay?
Thanks, Bill.
Practice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave.